Today we're going to be making a transition with 3 flat sides. This will be a series of 4 episodes. We're going to do 3 flat sides today, then we're going to do another episode with 2, then 1, and then no flat sides. This will be most of the transitions you'll make in this trade, whether it's a duct reducer or reducing a cabinet on a new air conditioning appliance or a gas furnace. Most of those sizes are standard sizes. The cabinets are 14.5, 17.5, 21.5, and 23.5. Now we're going to do this in 3 pieces. Sometimes you got to do them in 4 pieces depending on what you have for metal. You know, if you have a really long side, you're not going to get it out of a sheet. So whatever you have on the floor, just make sure you take into account your connections. I'm going to show you how to find this side. So our total measurement for this fitting is 6. We have 5 from the top of our furnace to our slip connection. We have to add that 1 inch in, and then we have to add our 1 inch in for our hem flange. So we're changing 3 over 5 inches. We're going from 16.5 to 13.5, so that's our 3 inch change. And we want to triangulate this measurement. So the way you do that is, and you're going to use this on almost every transition you do, unless you have some flat sides to measure off of. So we want to find 5, and then we want to come over to 3. And we get 5 3/4. So now to get that number, all we have to do is take the 2 allowances that we took off. So we end up with a 7 3/4 piece.
Yeah, bitch! Magnets! Oh!
Now, you don't want to make transitions that are over 45 degrees. There's a couple of reasons for that. If you have an end coil in here and you really squeeze this over, you can end up freezing that slab on an end coil. You can end up causing a problem in a heat exchanger on one of the tubes. So try and avoid that. And the other reason for that is you don't want to have to bend a hem flange on a furnace over if you don't have to. You know, you have that 1 inch coming up, and if you make this really steep, they'll hit. You can oversize them a little bit if you have to avoid it. Sometimes you just have to give them a little kick to get them in. Or you can make this fitting with a 1 inch straightaway. There's a number of ways you could do it, but just avoid making them too short. So if an example of this being too short would be we're 5 inches tall. We wouldn't want to make this 4 inches here. You don't want to be any lower than the height of your fitting. And that's a general rule in ductwork as it is. You should never change anything less than the height. So if anything, have a square measurement, you're changing 6 over 6. And that should be fine. So with that said, we'll get started on this. So first thing we want to do, scribe our 1 inch on the bottom for our hem flange. Scribe our Pittsburgh. I will do this today in magic marker so that you guys can see everything we're doing. So this is our 1 inch on the top. This is our 1 inch on the bottom. This is our Pittsburgh. Now our total measurement was 7. We have a fitting that needs to be 6 tall. We're going to lose an inch in the hem flange, so therefore we had to add that in, so that was 7. So this is our Pittsburgh at this end. So we are going to draw our 20 line, which will be 21 from the edge because we have to allow for the Pittsburgh. Then we're going to do our 13.5 here, or 16.5 here. Now I could have added in the 1/4 inch for the Pittsburgh lock on this end that goes into the Pittsburgh. I don't like to do that on stuff, and I don't want to show you to do it that way because sometimes if you put that measurement in and add it to the total, it tends to grow on you a bit, and you end up with a side that's longer than anything else. So we have 20. 16 and a half, 13 and a half, 20. This is our hem flange down here. So now, when you're measuring a transition, we're changing 3 inches. So you're always going to measure what's in between. You don't want to count your connections in when you find this measurement, when you triangulate this. You don't want the 1 inch for the slip here, and you don't want the half, because you don't want it to grow more when you measure it. So what we're going to do is we're changing 3 inches, 16 and a half to 13 and a half, and we're changing that over 5. All you have to do is your 5 here, you're changing 3, and you come up to 5 3/4. That's how you find the side of any transition. If you had a transition with no flat side, that's how you would find how long it needed to be. But you're always going to use the corresponding side to find what that side is going to be. But again, even if you didn't have a flat side, you could still find your first side by using that method.
No way.
That's great.
We landed on the moon.
You don't need to do it on paper, using trigonometry, calculators, or anything. Even if you could not find it that way, if you didn't have enough room, you could draw it on the corner of a piece of metal. If it was 4 feet long or whatever it was, you can draw it out on the metal and do the same thing. Just put the marks on the metal. An example of that would be doing this. If I came over here and I drew 3 and I drew 5, I can come over and I can find that 5 3/4 right there. So without even knowing what I was going to do, and I'll show you here now, 5 3/4. That's all you have to do. You don't have to a squared plus b squared equals c squared, or trying to put angles in things. I saw somebody on TikTok the other day doing it, and it was just ridiculous. So we're cutting here for a duct flange, for our duct connection. You can use notchers to do this if you want. I'm just more comfortable doing it this way. I've been doing it this way for 40 years. Doing a straight cut here for our flange. So that is our finished piece. Now we're going to do the side that connects here. Okay, so now we're going to make our other side. So there is no Pittsburgh over here, but we do need the quarter for the other side of the Pittsburgh. So it's 13 and a half. So we're going to go 13 3/4. We're going to add this quarter in. Now, me personally, I add a lot of stuff in when I take measurements, and I don't just come over like I see a lot of guys do this. They'll add the quarter, and then they'll come over and they'll add this. You don't have to do that. Just, if you know it's 13 and a half, add that quarter there. It's 13 3/4. And 16 and a half, add our quarter for this end in. The only thing you don't want to do is add your quarters in on the angled sides. You want to do them by hand. Again, it will grow. So now we're going to bend our last side, or we're going to lay out our last side. We're going to have Pittsburghs here. So again, we went over this before. So we had 5 in between, 5 3/4 in between, but we have to add our 2 inches back to that for the hem flange and our 1 inch connection to our slip. So we're going to be at 7 3/4. Now we need 2 Pittsburghs on either end, and our measurement was 20. So we have to add our 2 1 inch allowances for a Pittsburgh So now we are going to be at 22. So we're going to add those on. We're going to add our inch at the bottom. Add our inch at the top. Leave these in there so you guys can see them. So this is going over onto this side. So we're going to do this Pittsburgh, hem flange. And if you wanted to tell somebody you were going to do a light kick to the outside, but if they're doing the rest of the fitting, they'll understand. Once they bend the first half, they'll understand what they're making. As far as cross breaking goes, you should be cross breaking anything that's over 12. Stuff like this, I don't really bother. It's so short and it's got slip on it. It's not going to make noise. Sometimes when you cross break things a little too hard, it causes, the fitting racks or something happens, but not always. But so that's our layout for this piece, and you will make a ton of these. This particular one is 16.5 to 13.5. The old air handler was 13.5. It was a 2-ton cabinet. The new equipment is a 16.5-inch cabinet, so we had to just drop it back a little bit. This is a fitting you'll see a lot of because a majority of your cabinets are 14.5, 17.5, 21.5, and 23.5 because the industry has started to standardize a lot of those measurements, except when you get into oil. Oil is like all kinds of crazy measurements. So we're going to run these through the Pittsburgh, and then we'll head over to the break.
How much? Does the Tin Man have a sheet metal cock? Look at this thing.
Just to give you an example of what this would look like if you were making it with slip, you can do them that way, and then you can take your button lock punch and you can put some buttons on there, and you could do that, and then they lock right in. You could also use that button lock on the ends of your straight duct to keep your slips on in transport and to help you when you're putting them together so that they don't fall off on you. But that's just a quick example of how you can do that in the back of your truck. Okay, and again, you can do this in a truck. A lot of this you could do with a cleat bender. If you have a 4-foot brake in your truck, you should be able to make this fitting. You go back to my hand Pittsburgh video, you can see how I did it there. They hit a little mess bend on that one. Let's look at the camera. So 90 degrees there. That's our hem flange. We'll do our quarter. Then we'll do our bend. Now we will do our left cheek. So again, and always bend your 1/2 inches into the inside. Do not bend them from the outside. You got that one right. 90 degrees up. See if I can get this in here and get it right. I'm pretty far over. We'll do that one. Little break. Okay, do our front piece, and I'll show you what I meant by that light bend mark on the other side. It's always easier to bend stuff on the brake and bend your cleats and everything else than it is to do it out on the job. Once you start bending things with like cleat benders, they tend to warp on you a little bit. So we have that light outside bend there. We're gonna do that light outside bend. And it's always good to squeeze your Pittsburghs in the brake and flatten them out so nobody's struggling on the job trying to get a piece of slip over a Pittsburgh lock. A lot of times I actually hammer them as they come through the Pittsburgh machine. I flatten them out. Okay, and you'll hear me say this in every other video. Tack your stuff together first before you finish hammering it over. Because if you made a mistake somewhere, you're gonna have to take, you know, a whole side off or something and redo it, and you don't want to be peeling that Pittsburgh back.
Oh, I remember them teenage years, baby. I remember them teenage years. You got to drop the damn hammer. Drop the hammer on them. Them teenage years here. I'm telling you, I keeps me a hammer.
Now, if at all possible, always try and hang your 1/2 inch off the edge of the bench so that you're not crushing the flange as you're hammering it together.